Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, how the heck are you? We are the beginning of June 2024. How are you doing? What's going on in your life? Are you feeling peace and ease or stress or a combination of the two? Jen and I were supposed to be recording together today, but she's not feeling well. We just got off of FaceTime, so we are going to record later this week. I am very unprepared for today, but as usual, there's been a lot going on. So the question for me is always, how cohesive will this be? And I honestly don't know. I'm going to continue to talk about the attachment wounds that have been going on for me. I ended up, and I have permission now so I can speak a little bit more freely. My coach has encouraged me to have an honest conversation with my mom about some of the anger that's coming up for me around my childhood and ways that my mom was just not able to be present for me and how much that impacted my attachment and what's been going on with Jen, which Jen is the catalyst, but it's really about these early wounds. My mom is not the only person. She just happens to be the only person that's around and alive. And I want to be really clear that it is a privilege for me to be able to do this work with my mom. Not everybody has a parent that is alive. Not everybody has a parent or caregiver or person who is willing, able to have these conversations. And I was talking with someone close to me, and they said they would not be able to do this kind of work with either one of their parents because they would get too defensive and would not be able to hear. And I recognize that I am very, very blessed in being able to have my mom be willing to have these conversations with me, and that it's not that way for everyone. It does not mean that you still can't do the healing. And I'll tell you that the majority, I would say 80 to 85% of the majority of the healing that I've been doing, at least this is my perception, has been on my own. I obviously process it through with my coach. Jen and I process through, I'd say, a majority of it. And then this small percentage of talking to my mom. So the healing work is really up to us to do. The reparenting is up to us to do. We can get support around it, but it really is a process that we get to go through. I think that those are the main things. What kind of circles in on this, and I always worry about how linear I can be, is in the middle of this, Jen went away for the weekend, and as she's been dating somebody new and has gone away for a couple of long weekends, we haven't had communication for different reasons. And this time, I was thinking we would have more communication. We sort of did, we sort of didn't. I got pretty activated, and Jen and I talked about it. I was kind of hoping we would talk about it today. We'll see what we talk about when we record next time. I love having you hear the two of us talk about how this is in Jen's perspective. And then sometimes I wonder if it's getting tiring hearing about attachment wounds, but I think if you have them, I would imagine it is really reassuring to hear somebody else talk about things that you struggle with that you don't hear about. If I have time to, I got an email from a listener last night. I really appreciate this listener. I haven't responded to know if I have permission to tell you her name, but she wrote a really beautiful email telling me how much she appreciates the work that I'm doing and my vulnerability. So this last week is also about self-care. So in this episode, we're going to talk about attachment wounds, what came up with Jen over the weekend, me talking to my mom, and then just some peripheral stuff. And I'm going to try and run through it systematically. I paddled Tuesday night, had a great paddle. I often come home and I'm physically tight, and it's not unusual. I woke up with a headache Wednesday morning, which sometimes happens, and I didn't really do anything for it. I hydrated and had a client later that morning and decided, I don't want to take migraine meds because I don't get auras before I get migraines. So I can't always tell if it's a migraine or not. I have this little thing that I lay on the floor and I put my head back and I tried to work it out. Took some extra strength Excedrin and then thought, it's not going away. And I started to feel nauseous. So I took some migraine meds. while this was happening, my mom happened to stop by and I told her, I'm working through some attachment stuff. I really want to talk to you about what my childhood was like. I'm pretty angry and I'm wondering if you're open to just listening to me. And she said yes. And we said, we'd talk about it in the next couple of days. And then I basically procrastinated. I just didn't want to do it. And finally, on Saturday afternoon, she came over and I said, I recognize that you are not the you that you were back then. I know things are different. And there's this part of my childhood and my healing that needs to have a voice. So I recognize that it's not everything, but I've been feeling incredibly avoidant and angry. And this is to normalize and validate for you, because sometimes I just withdraw from relationships, or I've been, like I said, very avoidant. The way our house is set up is the master bedroom is at the back of the house. It has a door to the laundry room, and the laundry room also has a door to my mom's place. And every time I go back to do laundry, I kind of feel tense because I can see where my mom sits to do her work. It's right where she watches TV. And I'm feeling angry and avoidant. And so I did send her a message and said, this has never been a problem. You're always welcome to come over, but I am processing through some stuff. You've never done this, but when I'm in the laundry room, unless I initiate conversation with you, do you mind just not initiating conversation with me? Because I felt avoidant. And she said that was fine. So that felt good. So on Wednesday, we talked about talking in the next couple of days. I just kept putting it off. Saturday, I was watching TV and she came over and she kind of lovingly said, do you want to make a plan? Because I'm sure you want to take care of this. And she really didn't want me to suffer anymore. And so I said, how about in an hour? Now, Jen had been away this weekend. We had spoken Friday morning. Saturday morning, she left me a polo, which is new when she's gone. So I felt really connected. I sent a polo back. She hadn't watched it all day. I did text her and said, hey, I'm going to be talking to my mom in a few minutes. And she responded and wished me good luck. In retrospect, I had an expectation that we would connect more about it either then or the next day, and we didn't. And I was feeling concerned that I would not be able to muster up the anger and the hurt that I had been feeling. And of course, since I've been talking to my coach about talking to my mom, I continually have these conversations, imaginary conversations in my head with my mom about all the things I feel angry about that happened. So I was concerned that I wouldn't be able to generate that anger because it's easy for me to go in a fawn response. I was afraid my mom would get overwhelmed. I was afraid she would get depressed. I was afraid that she'd cry and I'd have to take care of her. Years ago, so I'm 60 now, when I was in my 30s, when I turned 30, I was in a recovery home from my eating disorder. And part of that process was having a meeting with my mom to tell her the things that, I was angry about. And she managed it fine. So there's not a history of my mom breaking down, but historically, my mom was a single mother. She was very overwhelmed. She left home, I think at 16, 15. She did not get what she needed from her parents. She comes by this honestly. I am not making excuses. What I want to say is it's possible for somebody to have their own trauma, to not show up for us the way that we need. We in turn have wounding trauma. I'm paying out of pocket for weekly coaching. Y'all hear how much I suffer because of this stuff. It's definitely impacted my relationship with Jen. It's probably impacted most of my significant friendships, most of which are not existent anymore. So there is a price that we pay for this, and all of it is okay. But I want to be very clear that in my case, it's not all good, all bad. It's a mixture. So I went over to my mom's house and then I just told her. I just talked about how angry I was. I have a big squishmallow. I brought it with me and I sat in the corner of the couch hugging my squishmallow. It was very sweet. All of the dogs came in to check on me because I think they heard me crying. And my mom just listened. She just listened. And I was able to say everything that I needed to say, including, did you even want me? Like, you certainly weren't prepared and capable. And I talked about the cost, that how it's impacted me and how I'm struggling and suffering. And now it's my wound to deal with and my trauma. She just listened. And then it really surprised me because she asked me some questions. And they were very insightful, interesting questions. I felt my body relax. And I had decided part of the inner work that I've been doing is knowing that I'm not too much. The messages that I got, I was very fearful as a kid. I would practice not breathing under the covers. We had somebody break into our house. We weren't home, but I was so afraid someone was going to break in again, and I would lie under the covers at night and practice not breathing in case somebody broke in. And I would want to sleep with my mom, and my mom was a light sleeper. So she would tell me, I couldn't move around and I was a very restless sleeper. So that fed into this narrative of there's no room for me, that I'm too much. My mom didn't have the language for feelings. So if I had to cry, I had to go to my room. Was never, ever safe to express anger, ever. So I'd break glass in the alley, and I did some things I'm not very proud of. But I was very angry, and there wasn't a healthy way to express that anger. And that was the adult's job in my life, to help facilitate the expression of feelings and emotions and talking about them. And they didn't have those skills, so I didn't get them. But I had asked my mom, did you even want to have children? Like you weren't very prepared. And there were some areas where you really didn't do a great job. And she apologized and said, I'm really sorry. I said, yeah, I am too. And it just was really, I felt seen. I felt heard. Oh, I know what it was that I was talking about, is these burdens of feeling like I was too much. My feelings were too much. I was too much. So part of the work that I've been doing on my own is imagining that when I talk to her, like, what does this burden feel like? What color is it? What form does it take? And wanting to leave it all in her place when I came home, because those aren't my burdens. It's not my job to take care of anybody. It's not my job to regulate anybody. It is not my job to have insight into other people's problems. For my clients, this is different. If you choose to be my friend, it's different. But how I learned to have connection and meaning was to be a surrogate partner to my mom when I was a child, and to figure out what she needed and to make decisions and to guide her. And that was not my job. And I was imagining before I met with her that I wanted to leave all of that at her place. Those are not my burdens. And when I left, I did not want to take them with me. I must be having a hard time sharing this information because I keep losing my train of thought, which is a form of dissociation. When my nervous system gets overwhelmed and dysregulated, my mind just checks out. And that's a little bit of what's going on right now. The other thing that we had talked about, and I've shared this with you, that before I turned 16, I had my learner's permit. My mom left me alone for 3 weeks while she went back to another state with the man that she was with to pick up his son to come and stay with us for the summer. I was a good kid. I didn't drive the car. I didn't do anything I shouldn't have. But my mom had made a comment about how capable I am and how proud of me that she's capable. And I said, that's not a good thing. I wasn't allowed to be a kid. I wasn't allowed to be irresponsible and noisy and dramatic and emotional and dysregulated, because I had to raise myself and I had to be here for myself. And yes, it's great that I have these skills, but it's not the way it's supposed to be. It shouldn't have happened. So we ended up kind of, once we finished processing, we visited. My body felt more relaxed and connected. I felt much more available and wanted to connect with her. And then I went back home for the rest of the evening. Back to the part with Jen that I had anticipated, and this is not a fair thing, but I had anticipated that I would get a polo from her in the morning asking me how this went with my mom. I think I expected her. These were like bids for connection, because we haven't really figured out, when you go away with someone, do we still stay in touch? Is this your adult private time? Because I am not Jen's primary partner. But what this activates for me is, as a child, when my mom when she wasn't dating and didn't have a partner, I was her surrogate partner. And then when a man would come in, I would be relegated to the role of child. And this happened frequently, and it really impacted my attachment system. There's more. And I did reach out to my mom this morning and said, hey, I want to talk about this stuff. But I asked my mom this morning, I said, Jen and I are going to be recording and I want to talk about this. I'm going to keep it very vague, but are you okay if I talk about it? And I said, I'm happy to send you the recording before I send it to my editor if you want to check it. And she's like, no, I trust you. You have important things to share. And in other episodes, when I've talked about difficult things, she said she appreciates how respectful I am of other people when I'm telling a story, but it involves someone else. So I had her blessing to talk about this freely today. So it was Sunday morning and it was Mother's Day. And I was having some hurt that I hadn't heard from Jen, but I'm trying to hold it together. These are the times that are really hard where I do a lot of inner work. And I suspect that I have young parts that are really, really wounded. And as much as I try and work with them, I often don't know how wounded they are or what to do. And so I sent Jen a text just saying, I'm missing you. Bid for connection. Because again, I don't know, are we connecting? Do we FaceTime? Do you have time to text? I don't know what's going on with her there. I just don't know. And she responded back and said that she had sent me something and Steve and I were getting ready to leave to take the dogs to the beach. And, so that kind of helped my attachment system temporarily. And then it was very sweet. My husband gave me flowers. My son Daniel sent me some flowers. We're getting ready to leave. Jen had flowers and some fresh fruit delivered. So I texted her, told her thank you, how much I appreciate it. And for that moment, I thought I was okay. I had made a plan to take myself paddling for Mother's Day, that's really what would make me happy. And my husband decided that he would go with me, not paddling, but he would go down to the bay with me and then he would sit and read while I paddled. So I took a paddle by myself. I saw this adorable little sea lion and took some video. It was just very, very sweet. And I spent a little time just watching this little sea lion. And I sent that video to a couple of people and I sent it to Jen thinking this is a nice way to connect. And it's something that she can share with her partner and the people that she was with because it's a little sea lion. And I never got a response from her, but some of the other people that I sent it to had responded. Anyways, I have the paddle. I go on with my day. But as the day goes on, I notice my mood starts to spiral. And then I suspect that this is part of where my OCD comes in with my attachment injuries, that my head's looped in and got stuck on this thought that when Jen came to visit me a year ago, April, she was dating someone else. But while she was here, this person that she was dating would call her and she would excuse herself and go to a private place and have conversations with this person. Her kids would call and she would do that, which was totally fine. And I remember in the moment thinking, this is helpful for me to see that there is space in her life for other people when she's here, which means there's space in her life for me when I'm not there. And it felt very, very reassuring. But here's the challenge, that with this, my attachment system, this is my interpretation, trying to make sense of the attachment. And where my head went was, well, when she was here, she had room for her partner. I am not Jen's partner. And when she comes to visit next time, she will probably be talking to this current partner that she's with. But when she goes away, there's no room for me. I don't exist and I don't matter. This reasoning in my mind felt very real. And I felt incredibly disempowered. I felt hurt. I felt angry. The feelings that I have between feeling that secure attachment and then going into this narrative feel like they're 180 degrees apart. And it feels like there's a part of me that just gets very irrational, very, very young. It feels very real, and I just keep looping on it. And then I can't tell, is this my attachment injury or is this a reasonable request? And I can't tell. So part of Sunday was challenging for me. The good news is I'm continuing to crochet. I have a show that I love. Steve and I did a number of things together. I felt very loved and connected. And I had this other stuff that was going on. And I just kind of worked through it. And on Monday, Jen and I think we were going to connect and then something happened and we weren't able to and we had to postpone it. And then we talked and I heard what was going on with her. And then, I let her know I'm having these young parts that are feeling like I want to tell you what is going on for me. And I don't know how to handle this. I'm trying not to act my stuff out, but I'm having these feelings. Do you have the capacity? And she said she did. And it's interesting that as I was telling her, I started to cry and my voice goes very, very high. And when that happens, I know it's a young part. And I just observed that young part and let her go. And I said to her, like, I know I'm not your partner. I may not ever have the right to expect that we will connect when you go away with your partner. Like, I just don't know. I did say that in this moment, the next time you do go away, it would be helpful for me if we can talk about what to expect, because I just don't know. And because I have a hard time taking up space, those little bids for connection that I did were trying to see, like, do you have room for me? And then when she sent me flowers and fruit, I'm like, how can I be having an attachment injury? She clearly loves me and cares. And I'm still having this looping of there's no room for me. And I want connection with you more than I want the flowers. And then I feel ungrateful. And then I feel like there's nothing that's ever going to satisfy me. And is this my history? Is this what's going on in the present? It's a lot. It's a lot, y'all. So when we had this talk on Monday, she said, she was feeling torn because she wanted to give me reassurance. And I said, I don't think that that's going to be really helpful. What is reassuring is that she loves me. She's here for all of it. But as far as her reassuring me, I did get information about what was going on in the weekend and why it would or would not have worked for her to connect with me, and that I had some expectations, and that we're going to need to figure this part out about where is it at when she goes away, and what are the rules. We don't know that. We don't know that in this moment. But being able to share about the feelings that I was having, this is where having hard conversations, we can't do this with everybody, y'all, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry to tell you this. I think what Jen and I have is definitely a gift, but what to me the intention of a hard conversation is both people feeling seen and heard. And whether we're able to come up with a solution or a resolution in the moment, depending on what the situation is about. For these attachment injuries, a lot of it is just having space for the feelings and the processing. That is what the goal is for me. It's not about, okay, we're going to make a rule about when you go away, this is what I get, this is what I don't get, this is what you can give. Like, we don't know. We don't know what that's going to look like. And for me to be in a place of saying, I'm having feelings, and I don't know if this is me acting out, and I don't know if this is me just sharing my feelings. Like, I can't tell. I don't know what's okay to say. I don't know what's not okay to say. Do you have capacity to hear it? That's how we get through this stuff. And Jen did not get activated by my stuff, and I felt seen and heard, and I owned what was mine. And it just felt really nice. And I think that was Monday. Today is Wednesday. Yesterday, we poloed a couple times. We did not FaceTime. And I think yesterday morning, I did not wake up to a polo from her. And I don't think there was a polo Monday morning. And so I've just kind of had to manage that. And I've talked to you in previous episodes about how I manage that. When I'm dysregulated, it's challenging on my nervous system because I don't know when I'm going to hear from her. I just really have to manage on my own. Although that's very challenging for me, I think it is. The benefit is that it really gives me a chance to do my internal work, which is really what we have. And I remember years ago having a therapist. I had a friend that I met every Saturday for coffee, and I loved it. And I remember the therapist saying, like, you like to schedule having your needs met. And it's always bothered me. I don't think that there's a right or a wrong. I think when you are someone like me who's neurodivergent, you're a planner, you're a scheduler, you have attachment injuries, you may have an anxious, preoccupied attachment, that having a plan can be very regulating. Does that mean that we have to be dysregulated and not know when we're going to get our needs met? Of course not. But what I try and do when this happens is to know that, well, I would much prefer if we had scheduled times when we were going to talk and I could arrange my life around these scheduled times. Even that doesn't always work. Jen and I had a plan to record today and she's not feeling well. So we went with the flow and did what we needed to do. So I could either have a tantrum. That's very judgmental. I could get very angry and upset that I don't get my need met when I think I'm going to. Or I can go, I'm having feelings. Let's look at the feelings. What is the reality? And do the work that I need to do and know that it's an opportunity to see how dysregulated do I get? How do I feel? And then it was really interesting. Oh, so my mom, we talked, I think yesterday, and she asked me, do you want to have either ongoing conversations about the things that were difficult for me from my childhood, or to just keep the door open? And I really appreciate that. I was kind of wondering how my mom was doing. Is she telling her friends about this? Does she process with anybody else about this? I'm obviously a deep processor, so I need to talk about my stuff. And I told her, while I appreciate it was so difficult that I don't know that I would really want to do this again, but what I would like to do is to keep the door open, that if something pops up, that I know that the possibility is there. And then she said, she would just like to have a day's heads up so she can kind of prepare for it and prepare some questions. And, which is totally reasonable. I wouldn't just go over there and expect her to be in a place to listen. But I said, given my history, after asking for permission, there's probably a good 3 to 5 days of procrastinating on my part before I would actually do anything. But I just thought that was incredibly kind and thoughtful and generous. And one of the things that we talked about is when I had my kids, my mom was able to really show up the way that I know she wanted to show up for me as a parent, and she just couldn't. And my mom we talked about that, and she said, yeah, I think people should have their grandchildren first and then have children. And I get that. There's a place in my heart that can hold compassion for both. But when I spoke with her, I really allowed myself to fully be in my young part with my anger. When Jen and I talked on Monday about, is there room for me when you go on vacation, and I had expectations, I wondered, is this more fawning behavior? But I also think that this is what we do in relationship, to say, I don't know if this is a reasonable expectation. I can't tell if this is my young part. I just don't know. And I think that makes the relationship work better. Is it fawning behavior? Is it just being an adult and going is it possible that there's more than one thing happening at the moment, that there's a part of me that wants you to be available when you go away because I want to know that I'm important and I matter? And is that realistic and reasonable to ask when I'm not your primary partner? Can both of those things exist in the same moment? The other piece of this for me that I've been visualizing is being in the home that I grew up in and being in the hallway and physically being expansive with my body, being loud, having feelings, making noise, knowing that that's how I should have been as a child. I should have been allowed to take up space and been mad and been happy and be loud and be squirmy, that's how it should have been. And it's not that I was too much. It was that my mom just didn't have the capacity for it. And so I've also been imagining being in my own space for some reason in the hallway. I don't know what it is about hallways. Again, being loud, being expansive, and taking up space. And two things happened when Jen came back, and it's kind of sweet because I told her about this in Apollo, and she said it's really helpful for her to hear this because it helps her understand more, and she feels like it's really a gift and very sacred that I'm comfortable and willing to share this with her. That part of me, when she got back home, feels more regulated because it's predictable. If I don't hear from her, I know she's either seeing clients, she's spending time with her kids, she's spending time with her partner, that there are reasons that are very predictable for me that I know why she's not available. Now, is this a helpful place for me to go to? I don't think it is, and I'll tell you why. Because when she is gone and I don't know the circumstances and I'm not able to fill in the blanks with known information, I tend to get more dysregulated, and I go to that place of why isn't there space for me and why don't I matter? And it mirrors what I experienced as a child with my mom having someone that she was dating not being available to me and me feeling like I don't matter and I don't exist. So what I've been trying to do instead is to use this visualization of me as a child in my childhood home and in my current home, of knowing that I have a right to be here, to be expansive, to take up space, to have big, loud, noisy feelings, to laugh, to move around, and I am not too much. And it's almost like that child part of me that was very restricted and, was very, this is probably part of my temperament, but I think that it could have been expanded, the part of me that's very serious and kind of like a wise old sage, I think could have been more playful and more expansive. And I think using this visualization is more powerful for me because it's not contingent on where Jen is and the known factors to give me a sense of security. It's really based on me having a right to be fully expansive and to take up space. And I know that Jen loves me expansive, taking up lots of space. And therefore, it's not about, does she have room for me? It's about, I'm okay exactly as I am. And she has room for that. And then there may be reasons why we connect or don't connect. I mean, this is going to be an ongoing process. Sadly, it's not a one and done. And the other thing that I had texted Jen about Saturday night, we talked about Monday, was I had sent a text like, okay, so after I talk to my mom, then all my attachment wounds will be healed and everything's going to be fine, right? I believe that I had an expectation that once I talked to my mom, I would have more clarity around what was really about Jen and what was not, and there would be some ease in our relationship. I don't think I was aware that I had that expectation, but I did. And so having this expectation, thinking she was going to reach out to me, feeling like this was significant, not hearing from her, getting flowers, feeling like I should be grateful. How could I not? How could I be having these attachment injuries? This is real life, folks. And just having to sit with that and feeling angry and frustrated because I feel like I work so freaking hard with this stuff. The amount of time and energy that I do this inner work, it's a lot, and it really takes a lot from me. However, today, when I woke up, before I even opened my eyes, I had this very full, expansive feeling that I felt comfortable and regulated and like all of me is okay. And then I opened my eyes and checked my phone, and there was a polo from Jen. And then Steve and I decided that we were going to hurry and get ready. Here, this is an ADHD thing. So Jen and I were supposed to record at 11, and we wanted to take the dogs to the beach. And I'm like, there's no time. I have things I have to do this morning. There's not enough time. And this is probably at 6:30, not even quite 7 in the morning. And so I had to, so this is an ADHD thing. You have one thing in the day and you can't do anything because you have that one thing. And so we had to think, okay, how long does it take us to get there? So take that and double it. How long does it take us once we're there? Usually an hour. And then I figured we'd be back by 9:30. And the reality is we got back before 9 o'clock this morning, and I had plenty of time to do stuff. But my first thought was like, no, I can't. There's no time. So I had a really full, expansive morning and got a lot done before Jen and I sat down. Before we met to record. But I have been in such a contractive place with so much trauma and so much pain and just trying to just knuckle my way through it that it feels nice that for this moment, I am feeling very expansive and very grounded and more settled in who I am and feeling like I have a little bit of distance and healing from these intense attachment wounds that have been going on for me. It could change any minute. And I will tell you that yesterday, I'm not going to give you specific information, but it's regarding some upcoming travel and some changes with who was flying with us, when they were flying, where they were flying. I paid for the tickets. Apparently, refundable tickets are not transferable. So if you buy a ticket for someone and they decide to make other plans, the money for that ticket goes in their name for the next year, depending on the airline. And I don't do well with change and uncertainty, and that's part of what we're trying to decide. Do we make these changes now? Do we wait another couple days till we have more concrete information? But what if we lose out on certain things because we don't extend the reservations that we have? I asked Steve to sit with me while I called the airlines because I tend to get very dysregulated. I didn't, but having him there kept me grounded. And then these other factors came into play. And some things that I'm really disappointed around this trip and booking and using miles and then having to pay for luggage, which I didn't think would have to be paid for 5 of us that are traveling, just a lot. And I kind of tapped out and there were some things that needed to be done. And so I asked Steve if he could handle them, and he was going to make some phone calls in front of me. And because I just felt a lot of feelings, I asked if he could make them in the other room because I didn't, he came to where I was. And so he started to make the phone calls. I'm like, can you go back in the other room and take care of this? And then I felt kind of exposed because, again, I don't have a poker face when this stuff happens, but it's just what I need to do to take care of myself. And I know that I sometimes have big reactions to things. I get overwhelmed very easily. change and uncertainty are challenging for me. And then there's been a lot of other stuff going on where I've been very dysregulated and I'm trying to do the best that I can. So these things are hard. And it's hard when I see other people seeing them. It was interesting. One of my son's girlfriends had asked us on the phone, how has this changed for you, Patricia? Well, she said, how has it changed for you? And Steve is like, he's like, I'm fine. I said, Steve is fine. Doesn't bother him a bit. Me, I'm having a hard time with it. She said, yeah, I have a hard time with it too. That's just who I am. It's just who I am, and it's not going to change. So I share this with you that if you struggle with certain things and people are asking you why or they don't get it, they don't have to get it. It's okay that it's hard for you. And I know that I come back down to center and then I'm fine. And thank goodness I have a partner who can, we can tag team that when I just can't deal, he does a fine job. And he said, all these details will come together and work out. And I trust that they will. But in the moment when there's all this stuff going on, it doesn't feel like it. So I think what I want to do is read you the email that I got from somebody. Because I haven't asked if I have their permission, I'm going to keep it anonymous. But I just got this email last night. It says, I just listened to the most recent episode and wanted to reach out and let you know how much it means to me that you allow yourself to share so vulnerably, even if it's with people you don't know on such a public platform. I'm always touched and inspired by your authenticity and depth, and I know I've said it before, but I can't fully express the extent to which I relate to you. Your way of thinking and feeling, your attachment wounds, your inner and relational dynamics, and more. I haven't often found people I relate to a lot, so it's important to know there's someone out there with whom I seem to have so much in common. And I wouldn't know that if you didn't share the way you do, because from the outside, we actually have very different circumstances. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has a lot to gain from your podcast and authenticity. Your work and you're simply being yourself on this podcast is so important to me, and I imagine to others as well. Sending my gratitude and appreciation and warm wishes. How sweet is that? I really appreciate getting emails like that because recently Jen and I talk about what are we going to talk about? Like, I don't know. And I feel like I get tired of talking about my attachment injuries. And unless something is feeling really passionate to me, I just don't know. I really want people to know that they're not alone, that you're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. I want to be a model for what it's like to be autistic and ADHD, to have a PDA profile. But I don't talk about my autism always in a very linear way because that's just not who I am. Telling stories is really what my gift is. So thank you very much. If you are enjoying the podcast and you think that somebody else would enjoy it, if you can share it with them, that would be really helpful. I think that's all I have to say. I'm sure I'll think of something after I stop recording, but I appreciate each and every one of you. For those of you that have been here on the journey since the beginning, for those of you that are new to the journey, to this journey in the podcast, I really do appreciate each and every one of you. If you're interested in getting in touch with me, you can reach me at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. If you want to work with me, you can head to my website at unapologeticallysensitive.com. There's a contact page there that helps give me all the information that I need to set up a consultation with you. I think that's all I have. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's how your brain is wired. You have a right to all your feelings. You have a right to be loud. You have a right to be intense. You have a right to take up space. You have a right to wiggle and jiggle and stim and jump. You have a right to do a deep dive into your special interests. You have a right to info dump. You have a right to speak your truth. Not everybody's going to get you. You're not for everybody, and everybody is not for you. The friendship stuff can be hard. It can be hard. I get that. And if you find 1-2 people who get you, that is a gift. That is a gift. You have a right to have joy and peace and feel connected and find your happy place. You have a right to all of your feelings. You have a right to be grumbly and unhappy. You have a right to be triggered and in your stuff. This is hard stuff. Being human is hard. Humaning is hard. I think that's all I have. Have a blessed day.